Jessica here helping me read.
Hello, everybody. This is Nanette Kennedy with Humanities Team and the Evolution Revolution. And we are on Chapter 17 in Conversations with God, Book 2 by Neale Donald Walsch. And this is all, it's been a great book discussion, I think. And I wanted to mention, too, that Neale's got another Conversations with God book coming out. And so this is good news. I think it might be March. I don't remember the date. But it's really exciting because he hasn't written a Conversations book in a while. So anyway, Michelle is not here today, so I'm going to ask Christine if she will begin the reading.
Sure, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
This is chapter 17. I hear your challenge. I hear it. Please tell me more now about life on this planet on a grander scale. Tell me how nation can get along with nation so there will be war no more. There will always be disagreements between nations, for disagreement is merely a sign, and a healthy one, of individuality. Violent resolution of disagreements, however, is a sign of extraordinary immaturity. There is no reason in the world why violent resolution cannot be avoided, given the willingness of nations to avoid it. One would think that the massive toll in death and destruction of lives would be enough to produce such willingness, but among primitive cultures such as yours, that is not so. As long as you think you can win with an argument, you will have it. As long as you think you can win a war, you will fight it. What is the answer to all of this? I do not have an answer. I only have, I know, an observation. Yes, I observe. Now what I observed before. A short-term answer could be to establish what some have called a one-world government, with a world court to settle disputes, one whose verdicts may not be ignored, as happens with the present world court. A world peacekeeping force to guarantee that no one nation, no matter how powerful or how influential, can ever again aggress upon another. I'm just going to have to turn on my light here for a moment, please. Yet understood that there may be violence upon the earth. The peacekeeping force may have to use violence to get someone to stop doing so. As I noted in book 1, failure to stop a despot empowers a despot. Sometimes the only way to avoid a war is to have a war. Sometimes you have to do what you don't want to do in order to ensure that you won't have to keep on doing it. This apparent contradiction is part of the divine dichotomy, which says that sometimes the only way to ultimately be a thing, in this case peaceful, may be at first not to be it. In other words, often the only way to know yourself as that which you are is to experience yourself as that which you are not. It is an observable truth that power in your world can no longer rest disproportionately with any individual nation, but must rest in the hands of the total group of nations existing on this planet. Only in this way can the world family finally be at peace, resting in the secure knowledge that no despot, no matter how big or powerful his individual nation can or will ever again infringe upon the territories of another nation nor threaten her freedoms. No longer need the smallest nations depend on the goodwill of the largest nations, often having to bargain away their own resources and offer their prime lands for foreign military bases in order to earn it. Under this new system, the security of the smallest nations will be guaranteed, not by those whose back they scratch, but by who is backing them. All 160 nations would rise up should one nation be invaded. All 160 nations would say no should one nation be violated or threatened in any way. Similarly, nations would no longer be threatened economically, blackmailed into certain courses of action by their bigger trading partners, required to meet certain guidelines in order to receive foreign aid, or mandated to perform in certain ways in order to qualify for simple humanitarian assistance. Yet there are those among you who would argue that such a system of global governance would erode the independence and greatness of the individual nations. The truth is, it would increase it, and that is precisely what the largest nations whose independence is assured by power, not by law or justice, are afraid of. For they no longer would only the largest nation always get its way automatically, but the considerations of all nations would have to be heard equally. No longer would the largest nations be able to control and hoard the mass of the world's resources, but would be required to share them more equally, render them accessible more readily, provide their benefits more uniformly to all the world's people. A worldwide government would level the playing field, and this idea, while driving to the core of the debate regarding basic human dignity, is the anathema of the world's haves, who want the have-nots to go seek their own fortunes, ignoring, of course, the fact that the haves control over all the others would seek. Yet it feels as though we are talking about redistribution of wealth here. How can we maintain an incentive of those who do want more and are willing to work for it if they must share with those who do not care to work for that hard? First, it is not merely a question of those who want to work hard and those who don't. That is simplistic. That is a simplistic way to cast the argument, usually constructed in that way by the haves. It is more often a question of opportunity than willingness. So the real job and the first job in restructuring the social order is to make sure that each person in each nation has equal opportunity. That can never happen so long as there are those who currently possess and control the mass of the world's wealth and resources hold tightly to that control. Yes, I mentioned Mexico, and without wanting to get into nation bashing, I think this country provides an excellent example of that. A handful of rich, powerful families control the wealth and resources of that entire nation and have for 40 years. Elections in so-called Western democracy are a farce because the same families have controlled the same political party for decades, assuring virtually no serious opposition. Result, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. If wages should jump from $1.75 to a whopping $3.15 an hour, the rich point to how much they have done for the poor in providing jobs and opportunity for economic advancement. Yet only the ones making quantum advances are the rich, the industrialists and the business owners who sell their commodities on a national and world market at huge profits given the low cost of their labor. America's rich know this is true, which is why many of America's rich and powerful are rebuilding their plants and factories in Mexico and other foreign countries where slave labor wages are considered a grand opportunity for the peasants. Meanwhile, the workers toil in unhealthy and wholly unsafe conditions, but the local government, controlled by the same few reaping the profits from these ventures, imposes few regulations. Health and safety standards and environmental protections are virtually non-existent in the workplace. The people are not being cared for, nor is the earth on which they are being asked to live in their paper shacks next to streams in which they do their laundry and into which they sometimes defecate for indoor plumbing is often not one of their dignities. What is created by such disregard for the masses is a population which cannot afford the very products it is manufacturing, but the rich factory owners don't care. They can ship their goods to other nations where there are people who can. Yet I believe that sooner or later this spiral will turn in upon itself with devastating consequences, not just in Mexico, but wherever humans are exploited. Revolutions and civil war are inevitable, as are wars between nations, so long as the haves continue seeking to exploit the have-nots under the guise of providing opportunity. Holding on to the wealth and the resources has become so institutionalized that it almost now appears acceptable, even to some fair-minded people who see it as simply open market economics. Yet only the power held by the world's wealthy individuals and nations makes that illusion of fairness possible. The truth is, it is not fair to the largest percentage of the world's people and nations, who are held down from even attempting to achieve what the powerful have achieved. The system of governments described here would drastically shift the balance of power away from the resource rich to the resource poor, forcing the resources themselves to be fairly shared. That is what the powerful fear. Yes. So the short-term solution to the world's foremost may be a new social structure, a new worldwide government. There have been these leaders among you who have been insightful enough and brave enough to propose the beginnings of such a new world order. Your George Bush, whom history will judge to be a man of far greater vision, of far greater wisdom, vision, compassion, and courage than contemporary society was willing to be able to acknowledge, was such a leader. So was the Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, the first communist head of state ever to win a Nobel Peace Prize, and a man who proposed enormous political changes, virtually ending what you called the Cold War. And so was your President Carter, who brought your Mr. Begin and Mr. Sadat to come to agreements no one else had ever dreamed of, and who, long after his presidency, pulled the world back from violent confrontation time and time again through the simple assertion of a simple truth. No one's point of view is less worthy of being heard than another's. No one human being has less dignity than another. It is interesting that these courageous leaders, each of whom brought the world from the brink of war in their own time, and each of whom espoused and proposed massive movements away from the prevailing political structure, each served only one term, removed from their office as they were by the very people they were seeking to elevate. Incredibly popular worldwide, they were soundly rejected at home. It is said that a man is without honor in his own home. It is said that a man is without honor in his own home. In the case of these men, it is because their vision was miles ahead of their people, who could only see limited, parochial concerns and imagine nothing but loss proceeding from these larger visions. So too has every leader who has dared to step out and call for the end of oppression by the powerful being discouraged and defiled. Thus, it will always be until the long-term solution, which is not a political one, is put into place. The long-term solution, and the only real one, is a new awareness and a new consciousness, an awareness of oneness and a consciousness of love. The incentive to succeed, to make the most of one's life, should not be economic or materialistic reward. It is misplaced there. This misplaced priority is what has created all of the problems we have discussed here. When the incentive for greatness is not economic, when the economic security and basic materialistic needs are guaranteed to all, then the incentive will not disappear, but be of a different sort, increasing in strength and determination, producing true greatness, not the kind of transparent, transient greatness which present incentive produce. But why isn't living a better life, creating a better life for our children, a good incentive? Living a better life is a proper incentive. Creating a better life for your children is a good incentive. But the question is, what makes for a better life? How do you define better? How do you define life? If you define better, bigger, better as more money, power, sex, and stuff, houses, cars, clothes, CD collections, whatever, and if you define life as the period elapsing between the birth and death in your present existence, then you're doing nothing to get out of the trap that has created your planet's predicament. Yet if you define better as a larger experience and a greater expression of your grandest state of being, and life as an eternal, ongoing, never-ending process of being, you may yet find your way. A better life is not created by the accumulation of things. Most of you know this. All of you say you understand it. Yet your lives and your decisions you make, which drive your lives, have as much to do with things as anything else, usually more. You strive for things, you work for things, and when you get some of these things you want, you never let them go. The incentive of most of humankind is to achieve, acquire, and obtain things. Those who do not care about things, let them go easily. Because your present incentive for greatness has to do with accumulation of all the world has to offer, all of the world is in various stages of struggle. Enormous portions of the population are still struggling for simple physical survival. Every day is filled with anxious moments, desperate measures. The mind is concerned with basic vital questions. Will there be enough food? Is shelter available? Will we be warm? Enormous numbers of people are still concerned with these matters daily. Thousands die each month for lack of food alone. Smaller numbers of people are able to reasonably rely on the basics of survival appearing in their lives, but struggle to provide something more, a modicum of security, a modest but decent home, a better tomorrow. They work hard, they fret about how and whether they'll ever get ahead. The mind is concerned with urgent, worrisome questions. By far, the smallest number of people have all they could ever ask for, indeed. Everything the other two groups are asking for, but interestingly, many of this last group are still asking for more. Their minds are concerned with holding on to all that they have acquired and increasing their holdings. Now, in addition to these three groups, there is a fourth. It is the smallest group of all. In fact, it is tiny. This group has detached itself from the need for material things. It is concerned with spiritual truth, spiritual reality, and spiritual experience. The people in this group see life as a spiritual encounter, a journey of the soul. They respond to all human events within that context. They hold all human experience within that paradigm. Their struggle has to do with the search for God, the fulfillment of self, the expression of truth. As they evolve, the struggle becomes not a struggle at all, but a process. It is a process of self-definition, not self-discovery, of growth, not learning, of being, not doing. The reason for seeking, striving, searching, stretching, and succeeding becomes completely different. The reason for doing anything is changed, and with it, the doer is likewise changed. The reason becomes the process, and the doer becomes a beer. Whereas before, the reason for reaching, for striving, for working hard all of one's life was to provide for worldly things. Now the reason is to experience heavenly things. Whereas before, the concerns were largely the concerns of the body, now the concerns are largely the concerns of the soul. Everything has moved. Everything has shifted. The purpose of life has changed, and so has life itself. The incentive for greatness has shifted, and with it, the need for coveting, acquiring, protecting, and increasing worldly possessions has disappeared. Greatness will no longer be measured by how much one has accumulated. The world's resources will rightly be seen as belonging to all the world's people. In a world blessed with sufficient abundance to meet the basic needs of all, the basic needs of all will be met. Everyone will want it that way. There will no longer be a need to subject anyone to an involuntary tax. You will all volunteer to spend 10% of your harvest and your abundance to programs supporting those whose harvest is less. It will no longer be possible for thousands to stand by watching thousands of others starve, not for lack of food, but for lack of sufficient human will to create the simple political mechanism by which people can get food. Such moral obscenities, now commonplace among your primitive society, will be erased forever the day you change your incentive for greatness and your definition of it. Your new incentive will be what I created you to be, the physical outpicturing of deity itself. When you choose to be who you really are, God made manifest, you will never again act in an ungodly manner. No longer will you have to display the bumper stickers which read, "God save me from your followers." That's the end of chapter 17.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. As usual, I'm always kind of blown away that what we're reading that was written, I don't know when it was written.
20 years ago.
20 years ago. Has pertinence to what's going on in our world today. And I've told this story when we were reading another book, and I don't remember which book it was. And I believe most people on this call are already at this juncture. And one of the things I want to be careful of doing is judging any other group or person. This happened, like, I'm going to guess 5 years ago at least. And there was a town, I believe it was in Kentucky, and the fire department didn't have a lot of funds. So they decided through a vote that every household in this county or township had to pay $75 a month for the fire department to come out to your home. And this one person said, "Look, I'm already paying taxes. Why should I have to pay more?" So he didn't pay more. Well, as fate would have it, as they say, his house caught on fire. The fire department came out to the scene. And I remember watching this coverage. I was sitting in bed with my husband. We were watching this on the news. And the fire chief said, don't anybody turn on your hose. This guy didn't pay us $75. We're not going to lift a finger. And the next door neighbor came running out of his house and said, you've got to go help take care of this person. That's the right thing to do. And the guy took out $75, or the guy that didn't pay the $75 paid $75 to the chief, and the chief said, you're too late. So the next door neighbor handed the guy like $500 and said, will you please just do the right thing? And unbelievably, nobody did the right thing. Everybody stood there and watched this man's home burn to the ground. And I remember just looking completely aghast at my husband. My husband is very like-minded as I am. And he said, well, I would have lost my job that day because I would have picked up that fire hose and done what should have been done. And I think when we hear stories like that, it reminds me how far I've come on my own journey. I would have probably never thought that was okay, whether I'd ever found Neale Donald Walsch's books or not, because I was raised that you're supposed to help people. But when God is saying that once we reach this certain place and realize it's a spiritual journey and not an economic journey, and it's not, I can't remember the other things he said. But for me, reacting when people are in need, or like when you see a child fall into a pool, you're not going to stop and think, well, let me weigh this out. And you're not going to, I mean, most people I've seen, like when a bunch of Canadian geese are crossing the street, everybody stops their cars. So I think these things are innate in us. We just need to figure out how to make them grow so that it's more of the norm than other behaviors. Oh.
Well, the politics of fear has to stop, right? Like, you know, I think probably everybody that was there knew in their heart what was the right thing to do, and they let some bully stop them from doing the right thing.
Well, but he was, I mean, I can understand where that fire chief's head was, because we have a similar thing. There's a little town north of where we are where their fire department does the same thing. I think it's $75 a year, though. I don't think it's $75 a month.
I think it's a year or two. I think you're right.
Yeah, but in any case, from the fire chief's point of view, he's got a problem. He has a district where everybody has to chip in order to provide the services. And if you don't chip in, then you're not a part of the solution. Therefore, you don't get the solution when you need it. The problem is that everybody's up in their heads at that point. There was no heart-based processing going on. I mean, the other people were, but in the fire chief, he was just up in his head. And you know, as a society, that's where we tend to live. And I think part of this evolution that we're going through, this sort of unraveling of whatever's happening right now, it's related to that, is we've got to learn how to move our processing from up in our heads to down in our hearts and stay there. Live from there.
I agree with you totally. But, you know, living in your head is, you know, again, a mother would not allow that. And, you know, it's the whole world's out of balance, and it's out of balance in thinking that, you know, that men are somehow better than women. And, you know, of course that's not true. It can never be true. It will never be true. And, you know, that's what's taking place here.
I agree, and I want to call on Brenna because she has her hand up.
I just wanted to add that I agree about it being a very cerebral kind of choice, but I also kind of disagree, because even the mind can have some kind of reasoning if you point the pathways in the right direction, because put that man's life in context. Maybe he didn't pay that year because he had whatever existential view on paying taxes. He probably will never pay now because he has to rebuild his life from the ground up, and there will never be any contribution to that fire department from him because he's maybe facing ruin. You could argue that in time he could reason by seeing somebody else's house burn down that, you know, he might see the light, and it could be a decision that he decides to pitch in the future. Whereas, you know, with no house, no whatever financial hardships he's having to deal with from that, he may never contribute at that point. I would say that it's more of a sleep rather of the mind, like a sleeping of the whole like triad of the body, the mind, and the spirit, because there's no awakening to like common sense even within the mind. Like it's almost like you're either spiritually awake or sleeping. If that makes sense? I feel like it's deeper than just like a mind versus the heart thing. I feel like it's a whole like everybody's sleepwalking off the cliff. That's kind of how I view society at times. If that
Well,
makes
I agree with you, Brenna. Like, I agree with you totally. Like Michael Bernard Beckwith says it, you know, we're all walking around, a lot of us are walking around in a state of sleepwalking, and you know, the innocence that all of life is gets programmed in humanity very early into the wrongness of you, and you know, and that you have to compete, and just all kinds of false programming. And it's the ones that decide to focus on their spirit that, you know, really are the pioneers for the new way of being on planet Earth.
Very good points made. Am I on mute? Nope. Usually am. Very good points made. And I think that if we all, if we were, you know, just to act in love and say, you know, that's part of the awakening. And I also think that for anybody who's got children or nieces and nephews or neighbors with kids, I've run out in the street for my neighbor's kid before. I didn't stop and think about what I was doing. It was, for me, it was instinct. It was just move it. I also scared the bejesus out of me. But in order for this planet to come together, and we all have to be able to see that we all have these certain things that we appreciate and love that aren't things, but, you know, children, family, animals, whatever it may be. I think most people with a fairly developed brain would hit the brakes to not run over the geese, you know, or they would run into the pool. I know there are some people out there that don't. And that's something I think we need to work on, is how can we get people that don't see this as an instinct, so that they see it as, so they do see it as an instinct.
I think you can just provide the opportunity, because you can't make anybody do anything or see anything. I mean, we can't even win an argument. I think that's part of what he started with in this chapter, is, you know, when we're trying to argue, and that's one of the things that this whole last several weeks has been showing us, is that we're not going to change anybody's mind. All we can do is create the environment for them to wake up on their own. We're not waking anybody up. It's really frustrating.
You know, it is frustrating because the people that are on this call have all devoted their lives to trying to make the world a better place. And that incident with the fire department, when I saw that, I was just, you know, like, are you kidding? I would have been out there with my lawn hose, doing what I could do. But I think that when we Wayne Dyer used to say that one of the greatest things you can do is a kind act for someone. And because you raise your own energy, you raise the energy of the person you're doing the kind act for, and everybody who's witnessing that kind act gets their energy raised. And I think that's really important. And every time I see somebody, a nice person, helping somebody else change a tire or help them pick up a mess in the grocery store, whatever it is, I always think about that because it raises my energy to witness it. Or if I'm the one helping the poor college kid, which this is a true story, 2,000 lemons went everywhere in the store. I don't know if the number's accurate, but there was a lot of lemons rolling around. And he was so embarrassed, and I just said, we've all been there. And I started helping pick up. Other people started helping picking up. And he was so grateful because he was initially just utterly embarrassed. These things happen. And, I guess the best we can do is be a good example at the time of the situation.
Well, yes, it's like Neil says, every day be an example of the best version of you that you can possibly be. And in Canada, I mean, the small towns that, don't have resources to have fire departments have volunteer fire departments. It's run by volunteers. And these people work, I worked with one of them when I was coordinating treatment in Ontario, and he lived in a small town, St. Mary's, and they didn't have resources, but he was one of the volunteer firefighters. And I don't know how often he had to get ready to go out and do something, but the fire department was run by volunteers, which...
A lot of communities in the U.S. Operate that way, especially...
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. No, I finished what you were saying. I just didn't know that I was unmuted.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that there's a lot of rural areas here who their fire departments are volunteer. And I've lived in one of those areas, and it's very interesting to watch what happens because they drop dinner, they drop whatever they're doing. They get in their own vehicles, and then there's a couple people that drive the fire trucks, and it's just like this impromptu orchestra that happens that they're just doing what needs to be done. Over.
Okay. I'd like to bring up a different subject, so to speak, and I don't know how it fits into today, but I know everything fits into today. This is Anne, by the way.
Hi, Anne.
And hi. My situation is, I guess I've been separated from my husband at least, 15 years now or something. And we hadn't heard from him in 3 years and stuff and knew he was in trouble. So I came back to South Carolina to my home here. And the reason I bring it up is I don't know how all this ties into what we've been reading. But I've never seen, basically he's a Vietnam vet with post-traumatic stress. And at some point in the last 3 years, he gave up. He felt so defeated by his life and by his inabilities to handle things that he quit. And the only thing that he did that keeps him living instead of killing himself was that he rescued a dog, and then he rescued another dog, and he lives for these dogs. And his life became, and I don't know what I'm going to do with this because, I walked into this house. It hasn't been cleaned in 3 years. Everything, he doesn't clean up the dog stuff around the house. I've never seen anything like this in my life to where somebody has really lost all hope and really doesn't care or want to do anything because they're that despondent about the circumstances. When we're talking about being asleep, to be that unconscious about wanting anything more than he wakes up and he gets himself together and he goes to the park every day with the dogs, and then he comes home and he lays around in the dark until he falls asleep, and he repeats it day after day. And then the other thing is there's no internet, there's no TV, there's nothing. And somehow, I don't know how this relates to everything, but it just seems like it relates to, we're looking at things from such a broad perspective or something, but here's, in my essence, because of the way we hold consciousness and the way that it's important to wake up and to live, this is like a living death to me. I mean, if you could see what I was looking at, I mean, it's just, imagine every dish in the house either being gone or in the sink, and just 3 years of not cleaning your kitchen or anything like that, or clean, just it's, so how do you touch souls that are that much in the dark, that have lost that much hope to having any effect? And this was a man who did great things for other veterans. This is a really great man.
I can respond to this because I was married to a Vietnam vet for about 10 years. And
I do want to say I'm trying to keep this in the context of the reading and what we're doing,
right.
as opposed to, okay, I'm just letting you know. So,
But it's perfectly within the context of the reading, and it is.
Yep. And I think one of the things...
Okay, I missed the reading, so that's funny. I just thought that somehow it fit into what we were talking about in people doing their parts. I mean, I can't look the other way. Everybody else does. I've been in this situation once before with someone who ended up with Alzheimer's. Everybody in his life turned away from him because they couldn't understand.
Well,
your
your intuition.
Okay.
Right
So go
up.
ahead, I'm listening.
Well, what I was going to say is, it doesn't matter whether the person's a Vietnam vet or if they're, whatever their situation is.
I agree with that.
It's the ability to be able to be kind and not hold, because I'm here to tell you there were 10 years of my life that it was not pretty. And one of the things that was most beneficial to me is that I ran into some people, other women, who recommended that I read a book called Wives of Vietnam Vets, or Vietnam Wives. And it was so reassuring to me that it wasn't me that was losing it, because I thought I was the one that was losing it.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the perspective of, what do you do when you come across a hurting soul? Like we talk about the neighbor that came out and said, here's $500, save the man's house. What do you do? Like after the effect of, what if this man was so despondent and so defeated by what was done to him and so victimized or something that he lost all hope? I mean, I'm just saying, what do you do to reach the souls that really need to be reached?
Tell you something.
Okay.
One of the things I did, which was very difficult, but I did it, and I did it with all my heart. I forgave my husband. And that's one of the things I could do. Because like Linda was saying earlier, I can't make somebody change. But one of the things I could do is I earnestly and honestly forgave him. And because I don't understand all that makeup. I want to bring in Brenna right now because she's got her hand raised.
Okay.
I just wanted to sort of talk about something I've been struggling with personally about Neil's book, because when I read them, it was like, yes, spirituality is the answer. But then I've been really conflicted with this lately, and I don't mean to segue away from the conversation about the veterans, but I'm wondering if spirituality is really the answer, because in my observation of spirituality, and I do mean that it is the answer, but I want to sort of like compartmentalize it or partition it a little bit, because in my observation of spirituality, it's like it becomes like religion, and then all of a sudden it's like institutionalized religion within government. And I've just seen some really amazing work in our government where things are just like secular, like these social programs that reach out to mental health people, these social programs that reach out to help people who live in hoarding situations, like they're government social programs. So I mean, maybe the people that run them behind the scenes are like spiritual, but I'm really interested to see Neil's book on how he wants to talk about medicine and God, because I just feel like maybe you know, we have all these, I'm sorry, and I sound like I'm rambling a little because I'm trying to like put this big thought into words, but I feel like if we create a society just based on the foundations of what God is, like kind of how America, if you have this practical idealistic America where just freedom and happiness and like you don't really need religion because you have all the characteristics of God and just allow everybody to be that, then the separation of religion from God's characteristics is just enough. Like you allow people to like do things based out of kindness, based out of happiness, based out of ideas of what freedom looked like, without forcing some sort of like definition of what God, like if we put God in a box and say this is what it is, we're going to put it in our government and everybody has to be this unified, identical belief system, action system. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling here, but I feel like I struggle with the idea of putting God or spirituality in everything, because I feel like if we keep just the characteristics in our actions, in our government, and separate the label of it all, like people are more free to have their own definitions of what or how they want to interpret divinity or God or religion and things like that. I really see the value in separating spirituality out of things that just do humans good, like social programs, like I said. I mean, the lady, I think it was talking before, was talking about her friend as a hoarder. I work in a program that helps kids, not necessarily hoarders, but like with mental illness. You know, if we didn't have these like social programs, these kids would be totally forgotten by society. So I'm rambling now. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off. But
Well, no, let me just add a couple things here real quick. One is, I understand what you're saying, because at one point in this chapter, I was thinking, is this possible? You know, is it possible for us to, can't even think of the word, is it possible for us to excel in just being good people? And then, of course, you got to be careful because you don't want to say good people, because some people, there might not be such good people. There's going to be the labeling. But just for the sake of argument, I do think that most people are basically good people. And I think that's one of the places where we have to start. We don't always, I'm not always going to say to the mailman, or here's some information on humanity's team or evolution. I don't think that's the way to go. One of the things, because one of the things Anne was saying was making me think that's probably not what, I think she said it was her ex-husband, the Vietnam vet, is that opening up, handing him a book about conversations with God is probably going to do nothing. But the fact that you were there for him at all is something, and something's better than nothing. And it doesn't mean that, you know, don't get caught up in that trap, which I'm sure most of us have done at one point in our lives, where you think you can save somebody else. Believe me, I went through plenty of years thinking I just hadn't gotten the right answer, you know, or right fix.
Well, to comment on what the other woman was sharing, is she's right, because that there are places out there that are set up to help people with certain things, and I think that the most you can do is turn it over to an authority or somebody who deals with that. So, for example, you know, I was going to go and explain the situation to the VA and see what they tell me to do. But so what she was saying about the, you know, like mental health and all that stuff, that was actually very valid, because it is true. There is a system out there that works, and it's a matter of when you don't know what to do. So that was a good response, is when you see somebody in trouble, is see if there's a system or see where they can get help, because you can't help everybody, but maybe you can lead the way. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, but you must show them where the pond is. You know, you might show them where the water is, or something like that. So I just,
that's a good response.
And
Linda wants
the other thing is that is what God is what she said about qualities. Is, to me, my impression of God is it's the qualities of God that is God. the mercy, the freedom, the love, the greatness, just it really is about quality. It's about the qualities that one can carry inside themselves that is godly.
That's a good response too. And now Linda wants to respond.
Okay.
I just want to say that what's coming to me is that everybody, each person, really just want to be seen and heard. And when we find people that are in such despondent states, like this Anne's ex-husband or separated husband, I think the biggest gift that we can give them is to witness them and to love them and to forgive them. I mean, the unconditional love and forgiveness, and then witnessing presence. These are the things that we can bring to it. And yeah, we can also offer up programs or other ideas, but the danger is that we end up thinking that it's ours to do. And other than loving them and forgiving them and witnessing them, it isn't ours to do, it's theirs to do. And it's a difficult lesson to learn. We spend so much time and money being charitable when we're really not helping. We're just perpetuating situations. And I mean, there's a huge shift in consciousness that will occur over time, I'm thinking, I'm hoping. But and like in the case of the Vietnam vet with the dogs, I don't know what you can do other than to try to create an environment where he feels seen and heard. Because that's what's happened, is he's completely cut himself off because he doesn't feel seen and heard. And I don't know how you fix that other than to just create an environment where you listen and you help when help is asked for. That's, we get into this thing where we think we're helping and maybe we're making ourselves feel better, but ultimately we're not helping. We're just perpetuating. I don't know if that made any sense, but I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And it does make sense because, you can still do random acts of kindness for people. It's Linda said it already. You just can't fall into the trap that you are the fixer for that situation. And it doesn't mean you just stand by and do nothing unless that's what your heart's telling you to do. And I think it's a complicated thing because we are spiritual people and we do have to keep, at least for me, like I was saying before, I'm not going to go talking to everybody about Humanity's Team or Evolution Revolution because I know how that did not work for me when the Jesus freaks would come up and try to do their thing. And it's a thing of not wanting to be told what to do. I'd rather see somebody doing something that makes me go, I want to be like them, or I want to, and I'm not walking on water, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I would like to find people that make me be a better person, people that make me laugh, people that don't care if I should burst into tears, or that if I share a story about my Vietnam husband who's doing, and I'm talking about your husband, Anne, who's doing everything he can with what he's got at his fingertips, he's doing everything he can do for himself. And the fact that you were even in contact with him, I would think, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I would think that that had to be something to him. Oh,
And post-traumatic stress is very, very complicated. And, you know, when the Vietnam War took place, it hadn't been identified as such a huge issue, but all of life, in animal life, plant life, all of life can experience post-traumatic stress when it's in situations like war. It's, you know, and thank goodness that we've identified it now. But I have a neighbor who was in the Canadian Army and in Kosovo, and you know, he has post-traumatic stress, and you know, he goes off. But it's like Anne's ex-husband. He loves cats, and he takes care of cats, and he rescues cats, and you know, but post-traumatic stress is it's devastating, and you know, it just is a devastating thing. And I'm grateful that we finally identified it. It's like when I was younger and my grandmother was losing her memory, Alzheimer's wasn't identified yet. Like, thank goodness that we've, you know, come along and identified some of these areas where, you know, humanity and all of life deserves our compassion, and we have to find ways to help them, not rescue them, but assist them so that they can love themselves again.
okay. So it's already 1 o'clock. And I think this has been a really fascinating discussion, and I welcome everybody's thoughts, whether they thought they were supposed to be in that part of the conversation. It turns out they were, because that's what happened. And I think we have much to discuss in further phone calls ahead. And
I also want to add one more thing and just say thank you to all of you, and hold him in your prayers, because I do think that what you said is that love is always the key, and having somebody be witnessed instead of slipping into the boondocks of things. It's very good. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this with you all. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne.
Look at how long we've been together as a group, and isn't that a miracle that we come together every single week and form this community? And you know, that's helping.
Yep, I agree. And I was just going to add that if something comes up for somebody that may seem like, well, that's one thing's not like the other, if it's really on your mind, we'll be the first people to say, oh, we're not talking about that. You know, and I doubt very seriously anybody would stomp on somebody for a concern they have, because that's part of what this group is about, is nurturing.
Well, there's an expression, and it says everything is everything.
And that's true.
And everyone is everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like that too. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. I love you guys. We'll talk again next Sunday. I'll see you on Facebook pages. And thank you, everybody. I love you.
Take care, everybody.
God bless.
Thank you.
Brenna, sorry we didn't get back to your conversation. We'll do it.
No, I'm sorry. I've just been struggling with it lately, because I'm just like trying to find that balance of where God fits in for everybody, especially when it comes to such large, the way the world is split up into such large societies. And when I start trying to put words to it, it just comes out as like rambling,
It came out fine, because you're right there. That's what you're doing in your own process. Is that you're just dabbling with that. You're working it through. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not playing small.
I like what Neil is saying, and I think I understand what he's saying, and I take it from the view of I'm sorry if I'm keeping people over as well.
That's okay.
I take it from the view of Thomas Jefferson, or some of the other founding fathers who had who were, I think, would be more classified as deists, where there's the supreme being is a belief system and a construct of theirs, but it's so universal that they pulled from those concepts and characteristics into a society, so that the freedom of what the supreme creator being could be anything for anybody, but the characteristics could be endowed by all people. And I really think that's a very valuable part of our nation. And I know, Christine, you're from Canada, but you guys seem to have a very holistic view of that just within the Canadian society, from what I observe of like your prime minister and all that stuff. So I get the idea that spirituality is part of the solution, but like how we label it in a way so that everybody has the freedom to make that what it is on a personal level is where I get like, well, how do we do that? How does that work for everybody?
Yeah, that we've been programmed to label, and labels is one of the things we have to, rip apart and put in the garbage because they don't serve a purpose at this stage in our evolution. They might have served a purpose before, but they don't now. And I like that you question labels, Brenna. And I congratulate you for graduating too.
Oh yeah, close. I'm almost done. I got my CPC. Yay!
Yay! Good for you.
Thank you.
And we can talk more about this next week. We can leave part of the conversation just wide open for what's going on. And I think it can be beneficial for everyone. And the only time I can ever see a reason to have a label for something is so that I can communicate with you that you know what I'm talking about. And it doesn't mean I go around and clump people, but when you're talking about PTSD, for instance, or Alzheimer's, just for the sake of communication, we could really all go rambling saying, well, it's that thing where you can't remember. And
No, but that's a condition. That's not a label. Conditions are different than labels.
right. But
I
I'm
think
just
Neil coins it perfectly in the last sentence of his chapter there in 17, where he says that we will no longer need to say, please God save me from your followers, because a lot of the time I feel that way. I feel like really frightened of organized religion, to put like it in words, but I feel like scared of the way that is seeping into a lot of the things that happen in government and yeah.
Well, it's oppressed women.
Yeah.
Organized religion. So I hear your concerns.
Yep. And we can have a whole conversation on that next week. Same bad channel, same bad time.
Sorry.
That's all right. I love you guys.
All right, take care, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.